nerds, what's up? Today we are doing a book review and it is going to be 100% spoiler free because it is a new release and it is Cut Both Ways by Carrie Mesrobian. I received this arc over when I was at VidCon. It was at the book swap that they did one of the days. It wasn't given to me like for a review, but I wanted to review it anyway because I find it very controversial, which is always a fun time. But first we need to do a fact of the day, and my fact of the day today comes from my favorite podcast, Citizen Radio, and it is the fact that we are terrified of Muslim terrorists and all that jazz, and you know, that's a scary thing. And since 9/11 in 2001, so 14 years, only 27 people have died from a terrorist attack, and you know, 1 billion people who have died from car accidents. So yeah, Muslim terrorism is terrifying in theory, and then we look at the numbers and it's not actually that scary. So let's get on into this review now. Here we go. Let me start with a brief synopsis of this plot and everything. Cut Both Ways is about a boy named Will who one day is hanging out with his best friend who is gay, and his best friend kisses him and he's like, whoa, wait a second, what the heck? Well, maybe I liked it. I'm not sure. Because he didn't think he was gay and he didn't know he was gay, and so he's just like, whoa, what the heck? And then a few days later he's hanging out at his dad's house because his parents are divorced, and he realizes that a girl from high school who's 2 years younger than him is a babysitter for the family that lives next door, and he's looking at her and he's realized he's getting all hot and bothered by her cute little body. Facebook. Bibliothon girls, I love you, but shut up. He's getting all hot and bothered by watching her from his bedroom window, and then he goes and talks to her because he does know her, and they end up starting to date. But while they're still dating, out in the open, girlfriend, boyfriend, etc., he is still hooking up with his best friend at his mom's house on the DL. Because cheating, and also he's just like, boys, Along with that is also a very important plotline that regards his divorced parents. The fact that he goes back and forth between homes, his dad is an alcoholic, and so he's dealing with that. And there's a lot of other really interesting stuff in this story that I think was really important to point out, and that is a really important and awesome plotline too. The child dealing with divorced parents who really don't get along and who are constantly fighting, and who he doesn't like really either of them. So some of the things I want to talk about, because I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it, and I'm watching all of these spoiler-free reviews on YouTube. I'm looking at goodreads and seeing all of these shitty reviews on it saying that it was awful because of things. And while I did have some issues, which I will get into, that's what I'm going to talk about last, I do really want to point out the fact that this is the most real high school male brain that I have ever read. Being inside of a boy's brain. All he did was think about his penis. I mean, and he thought about his dad, and he thought about his mom, and he thought about his friends and what they would think of him if he was gay, because what if he's gay? All of that stuff, and it was so selfish, which he's a 17-year-old high school boy, which girls are selfish too, and all he cared about was what people thought of him. If that isn't the most accurate representation of what high schoolers are and what they think about, then I don't know what is, because that is exactly what high school is about. It is about being part of a clique. It is about being, who do you represent? Who are you representing? Who represents you? Etc. etc. And it is, how can I fit in? I thought that was the most real thing ever. I also really connected with this story because I was the girlfriend in this plot line when I was in high school. The only difference was my boyfriend cheated on me with another girl. He is a morally ambiguous character. He is a shitty person because he's cheating on his girlfriend with this other person, with this guy. But that doesn't make this a bad book. It just makes it an interesting character that we don't get to hear about very often. We all we ever hear are about the man who used to be a player and used to get with all the girls, and then it comes to light that he never had sex ever in his life until he met this girl and now he's obsessed with her. That is our young adult plotline. And so that's why I think this book is important, because that's not usually how high school relationships work in general, at least from when I was in high school, which was only 5 years ago. 4 years ago? 5 years ago. There are a lot of sex scenes in this book, including masturbation, including oral sex, including penetration, including hands, and including just thinking about it and waking up and having splooge on your sheets. No one ever talks about masturbation either in books. High schoolers masturbate. Girls masturbate too, let me be clear. This happens to be about a boy, and we don't get to see the girl's point of view at all. We don't get to see anyone's point of view but Will's. And I think that's really important to add young adult literature. Like, high schoolers are sexual beings. It is actually probably, I don't know, like, it is when you're first experiencing sexual feelings. That's not true. Middle school is when it starts happening. And we as a society are so, like, terrified of the fact that our young children are sexual. They are. At 14, I was a sexual person. I was looking at people's bodies as sexual, and I was getting turned on by them, or not turned on by them, but based on what I was attracted to, etc. Like, that was a real thing that happened, and I think it's important to point it out. The other thing that I really loved about this book was towards the end, obviously no spoilers, I'm not going to give what happens away, but there is an argument between family members, and there is some homophobic content that happens in it, and just how it was worded, what the reactions was very real. Felt like this book felt like I was just happened to be watching a real life teenage boy go about his life who happens to be not straight, dealing with the consequences of both of that, of cheating, of his divorced parents, of his alcoholic father. I was just watching him go through his life and dealing with it, because high schoolers, a 17-year-old boy is not mentally prepared to deal with the type of consequences of a father being alcoholic or being everything that he is in this story. And so it's okay for him not to be able to wrap his brain about it and react in the way that I might react as a 22-year-old or someone else might react as a 30-year-old, because he's 17. It was so well written it felt like a real 17-year-old, not a 17-year-old who's actually 30 because the author is 30. You know what I mean? Now, I do want to talk just a few issues I did have with the book, which is why it was knocked down from 5 to 4, because there isn't really a plot line in this story. There's no character growth. Will is exactly the same person he is on page 1 as he is at the last page of the book. He doesn't really... He doesn't ever realize what his sexuality really is, which I'm gonna get to in a minute because there's a problem with that too. So he never fully understands and comes to comprehend his sexuality. He doesn't ever really figure out how to deal with his household situations with his mom and his dad. He doesn't really realize how to deal with the fact that he, in all reality, is probably in love with 2 people at the same time, which isn't a problem, but it is when you're lying about it. He doesn't really grow at all in the story, and so that was a problem. I really wanted to see him come to identify himself either as bisexual or as pansexual, or something that involves being attracted to both genders and not just one, because that is exactly what he is. And so I was disappointed that that didn't happen. So that comes to my next point, which is the fact that the word bisexual never happens in this book, which is how it was portrayed in the media when it was coming out. It was being sold as a bisexual story. It has many more parts to it than just that, which I loved, but also he never comes to terms with that, so he never says it. However, I wrote on Goodreads this quote, and I wanted to quote it as well. I think it's really important, and it's from the author's note. Carrie writes that adolescence is when young people are just starting their sexual exploration, and in writing this book, I wanted to explore how some teenagers might come to define themselves as bisexual. Do they land on gay or lesbian first, or would they assume that they were bisexual to begin with? Would it be difficult to accept that they were attracted to both genders, or possibly didn't even care about gender when it came to love and sex and romance? How would you explain this to others? And then later she says, I don't know what Will's identity is. Even if I did know, I think it's more interesting for a reader to contemplate what he is and what he might be than for me to label him with certainty. So I understand where she was coming from, although I think she's just too early in the game for that. We don't have enough representation in our young adult, or really in our any reading, in our fictional stories, for this to be good enough representation for what most people want. And that's unfortunate because it puts the writer in a box that they have to be the representation for all bisexuals in the world, for all young adults ever. That's what this book had to be. And that sucks, because that means that you can't write a bisexual who happens to be a fucking asshole who cheats on his girlfriend with a boy. That's not okay, because bisexuals often get stereotyped as cheaters, and so you don't want to read about a bisexual who is a cheater, except that that's a thing that happens. It is not something that all bisexuals do. I've never cheated, but it is something that happens because all bisexuals are still people and cheating happens on a regular basis. Teetering on this point because I don't think it's fair to make this point to Carrie. I don't think it's fair to her as an author, but also it is a problem. I'm sorry if you can hear the leaf blowing, because it's happening. That's really my only two problems. Other than that, I really loved the story. I loved that it had sex in it. I loved that it felt like I was really in the head of a 17-year-old boy. I know plenty of 17-year-old boys. I knew them before. I know a 12-year-old boy now, and all he does is think about his penis. So, I mean, not that that's all he thinks about even. Like, it's just a majority of what he thinks about. But when I was a teenager, like, all I thought about was, can I put my hand on my vagina at this point, or is that inappropriate? Like, am I in private yet? Because I want to be doing that. Like, yeah, that's something that teenagers think about. And it's unfair for us as adults who write, or unfair for us as adults who read, to assume that that no longer happens because we've forgotten what it was like to be a fucking teenager. That was my feelings on Cut Both Ways. I recommend this book to anyone who doesn't care about reading sex scenes, who doesn't need the representation of LGBTQ to be perfect in every single book that's written about it because it's unfair to authors. And if you don't have those two problems, then I think you'll like this book. Overall, it was really, really good. It made me laugh. It made me hot, like aroused. I'm gonna link my sex and YA discussion that I posted like a few months ago, because that is a very big topic for me if you're interested, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Pick this up if it sounds good to you, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!